Beheler, and I'm sitting here with Christina Titus, who helps on a lot of the work of the CTC, and she is going to be managing the question box as well during this event. You're going to be on listen-only mode for the first part of the presentation. But I would like for all of you to type in the question box your name and your email address. We did not require registration for this, but we want to make sure that if you're actually on this call, at least you get the link to the recording so that you can use that as a resource on a go-forward basis. The Business and Industry Leadership Team concept is a process by which the employers in your area actually co-lead your work. It is not an advisory council, and it has basically taken off. We've been doing it since a long time ago, 2003 forward probably, or maybe even before that. But it has taken off and become very, very popular nationally at this point. The program officers like it, so they're promoting it among some of the people that have a good idea for a grant, submit a proposal, but maybe don't have high business engagement. And just in general, it's becoming very, very important. It starts with the basic premise that when employers co-lead your work, they're going to be more interested in hiring your graduates. And I'll go through this, I'll give you context, etc. And at the end, we have a time for questions, and I hope you will be sending your questions in through the chat box. And then we can also open it up and let them ask them, can't we, Christina? Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can open it up and let you ask them in real time as well. So without further ado, okay, doesn't want to move forward. There's a big mismatch here. 96% of us think that we do a great job of meeting the needs of the workforce. 11% of businesses do. Here's another one, 72-42. That's maybe not quite as different, but it's still not good. But I think we can all agree that the major goal for all college programs is for students who complete our degrees, certificates and degrees, for them to be well qualified and ready for employment or transfer, and that the employers are very highly engaged and want to hire our students. In fact, perhaps picking our students above other avenues for finding job-ready candidates for their positions. Implementing the Business and Industry Leadership Team model helps to meet both those goals, and it's actually proven effective. We have data, lots and lots of evidence to prove it works. Our agenda for this webinar, I'm going to set the context for why we did the BILT, and I'm going to highlight the benefits for students, faculty, and the actual BILT members. I've also been asked over time to highlight the absolute essentials of a BILT. We have a lot of processes that we do, but there are 3 or 4 that are just absolutely essential, and you cannot call your Business Advisory Council a BILT just because you call it a BILT. You have to do at least the absolute essentials for a Business and Industry Leadership Team. We'll also identify who you should have on your BILT. May not be the people you have now. How do you recruit and retain those members? We'll talk about how to do the analysis of the knowledge, skills, and abilities that the employers want to see in your graduates 12 to 36 months in the future. We'll introduce how the faculty can use the prioritized KSAs that the employers provide to determine curriculum. We'll clarify differences between the BILT and a BAC, in the words of our current BILT chair, and then we'll have Q&A. So we have a full schedule, but I think we can do it in the next hour. Origins of the BILT. I happen to be hired as Dean at Collin College to grow IT enrollment and engineering technology enrollment just after 9/11 in 2001. Well, we were coming off the late 90s where we would never, ever, ever be able to produce enough IT graduates to fill all of the need nationwide. I remember the number was something like 1.2 million jobs in IT were going unfilled because there weren't enough qualified candidates for those jobs. However, just as we revved up, then we had the dot-com bust, where the dot-com industries that were in fact providing a lot of the impetus for needing more IT workers basically fell apart. And 70 to 100,000 workers in the North Texas region alone were laid off in these industries. Similar to the nation, there were some places in the nation that didn't get hit quite as hard, but in our area it was significant, as it was in many other parts of the country. So enrollment declined and continued to decline precipitously. I don't have the numbers in front of me right now, but as I recall, we lost something like 80% of our students, and it was really a big dilemma. How are we going to grow enrollment? Well, I've been in IT for a very long time. When it goes down, it comes back up, but it comes back up differently, and while it's really down, it's pretty difficult to grow enrollments. My choices as a dean were to give up and wait it out, downsize the programs, and eliminate probably about half the faculty associated with them, and that was one suggestion that was actually given me. The other one is to keep trying to recruit students as usual, go talk to the businesses, keep pushing. I did not do that because, frankly, it wouldn't have worked. I don't think when you're trying to lay people off at a company that it's ever on your mind to think about training. In fact, that's one of the budget items that gets cut first. I've been in corporate America where I had to lay people off, and I guarantee you I wasn't thinking about training anybody who was left behind, and I really wasn't thinking too far beyond the next quarter. What we decided to do was plan for the future with very, very strong employer involvement. And what we did was we built on a small National Science Foundation project the college had, and a good reputation with the program officers, and the fact that at least half of the community and technical colleges in the nation were facing very similar issues. And again, as I said, when IT goes down, it does come back, but it comes back differently. And in education, usually we have to scramble, because I don't know about your college, but in general, it's a good 12 months before you can put a new certificate in, new credit certificate in, if not longer. And in IT, the IT businesses have always wanted us to be faster than that at reacting to their needs. So our opportunity was to submit a regional center through the NSF-ATE program that would begin to predict the technical skills that would be needed when IT came back. And we worked with colleges regionally and eventually nationally to address that. Everything we've done has been very strongly built on employer input, employer guidance. It's really a little bit stronger than input. We want them to predict the technical skills that are going to be required 12 to 36 months in the future. I'd love it if we could ask for 5 years, but they can't see that far. Almost no one can. And we created the curriculum at that time to meet those needs, and I managed to not lay off any of my faculty at that time, which was pretty exciting. And many of them were helping to make the curriculum, and we did some creative things about having continuing ed classes meet with our credit classes. We did lots of things to get by. The approach in the beginning was to call the Dallas County District, the Tarrant County District, to come to work, or to work with us at Collin, and also work with UNT, which is a major university in the area. And we discussed our common needs, our common issues, our common problems, and we also did a call to action with a dozen business leaders, phone calls asking for help, not money. It was nice that we weren't asking for money because they were laying people off. They really didn't want to do that. They didn't want to give us money, and we didn't ask. We had several focus groups discussing their willingness and commitment to design the future, even when they were dealing with pretty dire situations. We also talked to the program officer, and we understood that a business advisory council, in their eyes, typically is viewed as a rubber stamp group, that it is not billed as a leadership group, even if it's leading, because they're pretty familiar. Most of the people at NSF that are program officers have been faculty and know that the business advisory councils, very often they show up, they have a dinner, they look at whatever we've put together, and we ask them to sign off and say that's good. Now, it's not quite that cut and dried, but it's not necessarily in a situation where we get the business and industry people leading the work. This approach was based on my former work with previous colleges and also working as a director at several major corporations, Novell, Raytheon, among others. So we ended up, based on really, really strong business leadership, we proposed the regional center, and it was funded in 2004. And we've been using the process for the BILT since that time. We've refined it greatly, but we've had the business leadership all the way along the way since 2004. And we're now funded for another 5 years at this point. Currently, our results, this is an example. This isn't what I would suggest every single college should look for as results, but our goal was to revise education regionally in IT. We now work with 64 colleges nationally, and I say plus because we're adding more as we go. And those colleges use what we do on a national level and then have their own local or regional business and industry leadership teams leading their programs. We do require our colleges to have active business engagement and use our KSA process, or at least something that is very intense, to ensure that you're really getting leadership from the businesses, not just advice. All the work we do depends on foundational knowledge from the businesses, period. So you really shouldn't really still call it a business advisory council, although I know many colleges have to because that's what their state requires. It really is something far more than that because the employers co-lead the work. Benefits to students. Well, our students are sought after by the BILT members because they own the courses, certificates, and degrees, and oh, by the way, we bring a few students to meetings from time to time and have them talk about what they're doing, what their goals are, and I have to tell you, I don't believe we've brought a student to a BILT meeting or to any other national local meeting where we have people from across the nation. I don't think we've brought a student without that student getting a nice job offer, maybe not immediately, but eventually. Our students are first considered for opportunities like internships before they graduate. They also provide some limited mentoring for the students directly, and that is pretty important. I know some people are in love with an IT career, and they don't really know what an IT career is. So sometimes our business people will invite the students over to their place of work and let them job shadow for a while, or they'll talk to them about the positions that are typical for entry-level employees, et cetera. And then also our BILT members participate very actively in our workshops, our working connections, our training in the summer, and our capstone classes. They are the roughest jury you'll ever have to present your capstone to, but you know what? Those students that really benefit from hearing what the business people think of their capstone presentations. And again, the students that participate in that manner, I don't know any of them that haven't found a really good job. They also help in job fairs. They provide speakers for classes, et cetera. The BILT also benefits the faculty. Sometimes I find faculty are a little bit alarmed about the concept of having the business people co-lead your work. It's not a problem, really, because faculty are still in charge of curriculum. It's just getting the assistance from the BILT members and having them flat out tell you what you need to include in your curriculum pretty well guarantees that your students are going to be better prepared for the workforce once they get through your certificates and degrees. And again, guest speakers, they help with, as guest speakers, they also help with recruitment events. If you're trying to recruit people into an IT program, and IT includes cybersecurity too, if you're trying to recruit students to go into this sort of program, don't you think that the employers participating on the recruitment event will be a stronger ask or a stronger presence than if we ask ourselves? Well, it is, and that works well. They also can alert us of future needs in the workplace in time for us to maybe adjust our curriculum. I know our BILT started talking about software-defined networks probably 3.5, 4 years ago. Well, they're real now. They weren't real then, but it was nice to know that it was on the horizon. Also, the BILT members provide free or reduced cost professional development for faculty. 2 out of the 6 tracks this summer at Working Connection are totally paid for except for lunches and the travel stipends that, or it's not really a stipend, travel reimbursement that we provide to some of the people coming to our training. The instructors paid for, the instructors' travel's paid for, the materials that are used are paid for by the BILT members. And then sometimes our faculty are able to have an externship with the BILT member. I know that when I was faculty, I was spending so much time teaching. It was very, very hard to keep up, very, very hard to keep up with what was going on in the actual changes in the industry itself and in the workplace. And so it was nice to be able to work with the business members to go see what was going on and understand it a little bit better. The BILT members benefit too. They are able to strengthen their pipeline of job-ready candidates. They also develop professional relationships with one another, and they actually really like each other and help each other in their own professional careers. Gives them a chance to give back, and because of the process, the way it's structured, and the fact that we always give them feedback on what we can and we can't do of what they want us to do, then they know their time is valued. And I think that's extremely important when you start talking about having long-term retention of business and industry members. Somebody's talking. Bare bones essentials. You absolutely have to have businesses co-lead your programs. If you really want them engaged, that's the only way to do it. Advice just doesn't do it. You absolutely have to have them prioritize the knowledge, skills, and abilities. They want graduates to have 12 to 36 months in the future, and you're not going to accomplish that with just a focus group. It's going to have to be some structured process. The process we use actually originated in the U.S. Air Force. It's been refined a number of times since then, so it doesn't exactly look like that. But it actually does take into account the specific items, both content-wise and behavior-wise, that the employers want our graduates to have. And then also along with this, we have to know whether they're hiring or not. It would be very, very sad to have a wonderful set of curriculum and recruit a lot of people to go through it when at the end of the tunnel you might find out there's not enough jobs around for even your graduates. That would be bad. And then they need to predict trends so we can get ahead of things. Faculty absolutely need to cross-reference the KSAs to existing curriculum to identify gaps, update the curriculum to address the KSAs the employers want, or if you can't, provide feedback to the businesses of why you can't. I mean, maybe it's something about equipment. Maybe you don't have enough equipment. Well, we've had some of our employers allow us to go shopping in their warehouse for the equipment that is just one rev out of date. And usually that works pretty well and can help. Also, too, sometimes we find that the challenge is finding enough adjuncts to teach some of these courses. Very often the BILT members will provide an adjunct, and you know, it's a dialogue, it's a relationship. It's a figuring out what's in it for them and what's in it for you, and satisfying both of those. The process works for any technical program at any size college, any location. I will say that I used it when I was dean at Orange Coast College. We used it for the sailing program, S-A-I-L-I-N-G. Out there, that's one of the few places in the world that some of the rich and famous can donate their very, very expensive yachts to the college. I'm sure they got some kind of write-up for it. But the college actually used those yachts to train the people that would then run the yachts. The skipper, they had names for the various titles. I can't tell you all of those at this point, but we used it for that. I've used it for engineering technology, for architecture, CAD, instrumentation, all sorts of different things. It works. And it doesn't matter what size the college is. We happen to be a larger college, but I've worked with a lot of rural colleges lately. So take just a moment. These are rhetorical questions for you to think about. How engaged are your employers? And I'm also going to ask for your program, how many people come to your Business Advisory Council? And how long has it been since you had someone new on the team? We try to have someone new every quarter. And we do meet quarterly. We don't meet face-to-face quarterly. I'll explain that in a minute. But we do meet quarterly. We try to have someone new every quarter because new blood means new ideas and keeps the excitement going. Do you ask your employers to co-lead your program? And if not, why not? Do you have them prioritize knowledge, skills, and abilities for workforce graduates into the future? And if you do, what process do you need? Do you have them predict labor market demand? A lot of us are using MC, EMSI, and Burning Glass, and that's great, but mostly what they're doing is predicting demand now. They're doing a little bit of predictive forecasting, but not a whole lot. And are your businesses working with you to predict trends so that you can get a leg up or a jump on any changes that might be coming down the pike in the future? Then do your faculty cross-reference what the businesses want in terms of KSAs to the existing curriculum and update that curriculum as needed? And do you close the loop and provide feedback to the businesses regarding the implementation? And even if you're doing all of these things, can you do these better? I would expect you had to answer yes to, yes and no to some of these along the way. In my opinion, there's always an opportunity for improvement. In fact, we were just working with a subset of our national BILT because we're going to change how the actual content of the KSAs that we use with the businesses this next time we meet. Co-leadership. Again, why do we do that? Because if they co-lead, they're going to like to hire our students. And the employers will assume that role if their time is respected. If, in fact, you have them come for a meeting, maybe you say it's 2 hours and you keep them there for 4, that's not so good because their time is extremely valuable too. Do you keep them there for 2 hours and waste their time? Do you really only want them to rubber stamp what you're proposing to them, or are you actually working with them to find out what they want? And do you have a method for seriously considering their input? And do they consistently receive feedback on their recommendations? I mean, some people say, well, if I just don't answer some of the things they want me to do, it's okay, they'll forget about it. No, they won't. It will erode confidence and their trust of your program if you don't provide honest, upfront feedback about what you can and can't do. Our recommendation is that there be 4 meetings a year. I know that CTE-based programs probably have to have 1 or 2, depending on the state. Only one of these meetings is face-to-face. I have here it's 2 to 6 hours. I really think it's more like 4 to 6 hours. Our group likes to stay all day now. But that face-to-face meeting goes through and uses the U.S. Air Force process that we'll talk about in a little bit to consider in detail what kinds of things they want our students to know. We start with a Proforma list of knowledge, skills, and abilities, and we allow them to delete items, add items, change items as we go. And then the 3 other meetings a year are usually web meetings. In fact, almost always web meetings, and they're an hour to an hour and a half long. And over half of the time we have is spent on industry trends. Now, I have to admit, I do kind of seed the people. I have particular people that I ask to make sure they can talk about trends. But once the trends discussion gets going, you'll probably find that they will roll with it and others will jump in as well. I also ask them for an informal forecast of employee need. Do they see the industry loosening up? I mean, in the Dallas area, at least, we've got unemployment in IT something like 1.2%. Well, that in effect means there's no open jobs because there's going to be some amount of mismatch between who's out there to be employed and the jobs that are open. We also provide the feedback from the faculty of what they did with the KSA analysis and anything else we're working on in our programs. And in our case, it's the national grant. In your case, if you're at a college, it would be your own program. It's also an open forum for faculty to ask for advice or guidance. You don't have to wait until once or twice a year. And we also discuss opportunities for other things they can do to help us. Maybe something for professional development. Maybe we're having an employer panel. We do a lot of webinars these days. We're, for example, going to do a conference in downtown Dallas at the AACC conference, where we have a former student, our BILT chair, me, and a program officer for NSF talking about how the engagement works with a highly engaged employer. We've done similar things like that for webinars as well. The estimate for the initial ask for their time is no more than 10 hours a year. Other opportunities can take more time, but they do that on a volunteer basis once they get involved and realize that what you're doing is something that's very valuable to the community. Why more than 2 meetings a year? If you see someone twice a year, how good are you? How good a friend is that person? How strong is your relationship? I think twice a year is almost out of sight, out of mind. We run such very fast lives. I do not see a day go by that's not just crazy busy for them and for us. And if we only see them twice a year or even once a year, I would say that it's a nice relationship, but it's not a deep relationship. And I want a deep relationship with these businesses. I have several of our team that we can call up, and if they're not able to talk immediately, they'll call us back same day. They take the relationship with us very, very seriously, and so will your BILT members if you adopt this model. Again, we talk about what disciplines can use it. It's been implemented all over the place, applies to any AAS degree, but you can actually use it for an academic program. But if you use it for an academic program, you really need to think about the members, including universities in addition to business representatives. I think it is important for business representatives to be in on it if you have an academic program as well, because ultimately at the end of 4 years, aren't we expecting those people to go into industry? Aren't we expecting them to get a job? With the exception of the people that are going to become PhD professors or researchers somewhere, well, even they're going to end up working someplace. And so it's really important to have the business people involved. Who should be on your BILT? The right people. High-level technical executives. Why do I want them there? I want them there because they're the ones that are probably going to be responsible for strategies for their business to keep their business in business. Very important those people to be technical, though. They need to know what KSAs are going to be important for a graduate in the future. First-line hiring managers, that kind of goes without saying. Current technicians, these people are grounding us on what are they actually doing in these jobs. And then HR representatives are good, but don't have it be all HR representatives. And they should not be the only rep for the entire company. Why? HR reps get their information secondhand from the hiring manager. It's nice to have the HR manager there, though, because HR, for example, we had a webinar, a meeting with a person from HR from a large corporation to talk to us about how they actually review the huge numbers of applications they get for every position. And it was a very interesting situation to share with our group nationally. However, she did not try to talk about specific content. At the BILT meeting itself, the faculty are ex officio members. They listen actively and ask questions. They do not take over, and this includes the adjuncts. Now, adjuncts are working in industry, right? So why would I say have the adjuncts actually listen and ask questions? Well, it could be perceived by one or more that if the adjunct expresses an opinion that strongly supports what he or she likes to teach, that there might be a bit of a conflict of interest. So we just keep it clean, and the business people are the business people and the faculty are the faculty. Again, faculty are still in control of the curriculum. It has nothing to do with giving up any kind of power. It's a matter of respect for the business people to ensure that you get what they want to hire. How do you invite people? Well, talk with the existing advisory members to determine their interest in having a more intense engagement. I do not fire anyone. If we're going in and working with a college to upgrade their team, one way of doing it is to go ahead and have a regular advisory meeting and talk about the switch to more engagement and just say we're going to do it and let everybody come along, and then those that don't want to do it will self-eliminate. You can also create a target list of employers and people that you may want to have on an active BILT. don't assume that companies are inaccessible just because you don't know how to get to them. When I was putting together the group in 2001-2 timeframe, I'd actually talked to the highest level person for some companies in our DFW area. Usually I didn't get to talk to them, I talked to their assistant, but I told them what I wanted in terms of the people on the previous slide, and that person usually told me exactly who to talk to, and that worked out fine too. Helps to talk to your administration about people they may know in the community that would be very actively involved in something like this. You can get help from chambers, economic development corporations, word of mouth, etc. But the WIFM principle has to apply. What's in it for me? People will volunteer for a short period, but we have people on our BILT team that have been on the team since 2004. And I will allege that 14 years of 4 meetings a year does not happen unless they're getting something out of it other than just philanthropy. We also send printed letters. We have some templates available. If you're trying to add new people to your group, phone calls or printed letters do best. I would follow up with phone calls even on the printed letters, but I would never use email to try to get a new person. After you have the group established, it's okay. They know who you are. They're going to open your emails, but these business people get hundreds of emails a day, and you'll get lost in the maddening throng, so to speak. Then creating a list of Proforma KSAs. How do you do that? Don't assume you know what they want. Ask. And then the Proforma list is a starting point for discussion. No more than 75 or 100 items should be on it, maybe less. The employers can add, subtract, modify, and it's largely a knowledge area list. There's a few skills called out directly. We actually, when we started, we had 450 items on our list, and it took 2 days to get through it. That's not so good, because the right people can't give you 2 days. Or 3 days if you're thinking about doing a DACM. That just doesn't work. So, you know, largely knowledge areas, some skills. The abilities, for the most part, end up being behaviors. I know that many of our employers find that the people they hire from our colleges are technically competent, but they're not the kind of people that show up on time or necessarily are fully engaged for the entire day. And then I know in some industries they have a real problem because they have to pass a drug test and they don't pass the drug test. So, you know, the abilities that we talked about are probably employability skills and that sort of thing as much as anything else. How do you create that KSA list? It can come from lots of sources. Look at programs similar to yours, start with their student learning outcomes, or start with your own student learning outcomes. Identify national standards where they exist, although they don't exist for IT right now, at least not broadly for all IT areas. And you can also involve a small number of employers and just have a brainstorming session. I'll also refer you to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, ONET. They have knowledge, skills, and abilities for several job titles. Their predictions on employment in terms of labor market data are a little bit out of date and almost, well, I think it's about 18 months in arrears. But they have a pretty good list of knowledge, skills, and abilities to work with. Once you get the list, drop the no more than 50 or 75, no more than 100 max into the KSA spreadsheet, and that actually calculates the employer input once we get into the face-to-face meeting. And be sure to leave blank rows for additions, because the employers may want to add additional knowledge, skills, and abilities as we go through. The mechanics. We use the job skills spreadsheet, and the employers rank the skills from 1 to 4, each one individually. 4 is the most important, 1's the least. The facilitator has to be very careful to remind the business people to focus on entry-level employees. You know, the community colleges are, in a lot of cases, all things to all people, because we're providing retraining in complex VMware while we're also providing A+. We're providing all sorts of things for the workforce. So for the purposes of the job skills analysis, we have to focus on one level of employee, and we focus on the entry level. And again, consensus isn't the goal. The voting is important, but the discussion around each item is just as important. The recorder enters the votes into the prioritization spreadsheet, and the discussion is documented by the minutes that are taken by someone else. And all of that information is then used by faculty to identify what they're already including and where the gaps are. The rating actually considers importance, level of proficiency, time spent, and difficulty. It's highly weighted towards importance. So rather than ranking each item 4 times now, we just ask people to think about this. The idea is if something is very, very difficult and the individual in entry-level position is going to spend 10 minutes on it every year and they have to be a guru at it, then maybe that's not something we want to train for at the community college or technical college. Again, discussion is extremely important. You must promote that, and it's important to actually promote that such that the ones that are in the room that are not very extroverted are called out. So sometimes I'll go stand by someone and maybe someone by the name of Jim has not spoken, and I'll go over and say, Jim, what do you think about this? Very often that's all it takes to get Jim to comment. Then after the validation process is over, we call it validation because we start with a Proforma list, by the way. The items with an average of 3.0 or above are usually included. Sometimes the group is kind of negative and you have to go down a little bit lower than that, maybe 2.75. But once you know that, then the faculty map the skills and knowledge areas to existing courses, identifying gaps, and coming up with curriculum strategies. And the very important thing is that the results and the follow-up are reported back to the BILT. Here's a spreadsheet. We had some knowledge domains up here, and you can see that Unix, Linux, and Windows knowledge domains were considered important. At this point in time, and I don't remember the date of this particular ranking, I don't know, but we had Mac OS, Android, and Apple iOS. Those were not felt like those should be a part of our network administration curriculum at the time. But you notice on Android and Apple iOS, they did have a comment from the BILT, and they had a lot more comments than that, but the summary of the comment was that it was gaining importance. So that's something that we want to look at and consider, but probably don't want to, we did not include in curriculum at the time. OS maintenance, various pieces of that, you're going to see that many of these things go along with a typical operating system course, and you're going to see that the rankings of items came in pretty close. We have since moved to ranking the operating systems maintenance, all of these things more or less together, because they were ranked so similarly in the first place. However, I have to say our group is wanting to become a little more granular this year, so we're going to probably break it out more like what you're seeing here. Then certifications. In IT, we have certifications, obviously. And if we're teaching toward a certification, that certification embodies a set of knowledge. And so we worked with the BILT team in this particular year to see what they thought about the various certifications. And this is just an excerpt of a few of them. The thing that was very interesting was, in fact, that A+, they didn't really value the certification anymore. They wanted concepts. They're actually kind of thinking that individuals ought to know A+ almost when they get to college. So, you know, I don't want to get into a deep discussion on that, but you can see they said, we don't value that particular certification anymore, but they do value the other ones, or did value the other ones. Last year when we met, I think they were down to about 5 that they really valued. You know, when the certifications first came out in the late 90s, well, not late 90s, late 80s, early 90s, early 2000s, you know, someone could go out and say, I'm a networking guru by basically hanging their shingle out. And the purpose of the certifications in the first place was to ensure that a person had some level of knowledge. Now, we can argue all day long about paper certifications versus courses versus labs. I think it's a combination. It's a combination of the certification plus having finished a course at a reputable college plus having had hands-on experience. All of those go together to make the person highly employable. Then once everything is ranked, faculty take the courses, and you'll notice it's basically the same thing I showed you before, but I collapsed the 1, 2, 3, 4s, because basically on the one before, we had how many people voted 1, how many people voted 2, how many people voted 3, how many people voted 4, and we collapsed that because we didn't really want that when we were doing the cross-ref. When we do the cross-ref, the courses are up at the top. There's a column for each course. And for each item that was ranked 3.0 or above, we needed to figure out whether there was an existing course that covered that material. And we did not get too granular with this. It was E for exposure in a course and T for thorough. And then once we got through marking each of the courses against the required knowledge, skills, and abilities, we needed to look back and find the gaps. You can see there's 3 gaps listed there at the time. And then also, too, if there's only an exposure across all of the courses that we teach within a degree or certificate, if it's only exposure, we need to take that back to the BILT and make sure they're okay with only exposure, because if they're not, we need to basically modify our courses and be more thorough. And again, we provide this sort of information out to the 64 colleges nationally for them to use, and they take it from there because, again, there's some regional variations depending on where you live. VMware may not be popular, for example, at a rural college. However, Security Plus may be very popular because there are a lot of DoD jobs in the area. Perhaps they're by an Air Force base or, I don't know, an Army post. And the Security Plus is pretty well required to be able to work in IT for a DoD job. Important features, face-to-face is a must. Do not try to do this ranking via email prior to the meeting, because the discussion is every bit as important, if not more important, than the ranking. Need to have full engagement by the employers. If you've got employers who are quiet, call them out. If you've got employers who are really too loud and dominating the conference, the facilitator has to kind of control that very, very politely. And it recognized that they should recognize that you can't train for their specific needs. They have to go up to at least the 5,000-foot level, maybe 10,000-foot level, to get a common denominator of knowledge, skills, and abilities that makes the graduate best ready to be employed. Everyone has a role. The industry people are the subject matter experts. The faculty subject matter experts come and are active listeners and do the cross-ref. The facilitator has to be very carefully responsible for the effectiveness of the meeting, making sure no one dominates, making sure the quiet people are heard, etc. The recorder records the rankings and sometimes the discussion, but the note taker needs to take the minutes. We've tried to have the same person record and take notes, and it just doesn't work real well. Feedback to the employers. Email the minutes of the KSA meeting to them within 2 weeks of the meeting if you can, or soon. Don't wait and send it to them 6 months later. Schedule the next meeting either face-to-face or online, but we prefer online except for the one face-to-face. And we oftentimes schedule that next meeting during the face-to-face meeting or during the online meeting for the next online. That way the people that are on the call can block their calendar at the time. Show the employers the cross-reference. Explain how you plan to change courses, degrees, certificates. Explain for each certificate and degree. I'm going to change what I have here. I'm saying for each course. I don't want to keep it from them, but I find it goes better if I go and explain a given certificate, what courses are in it, and all of the KSAs that are covered. It's easier for them to see rather than going course by course, because they really care about the outcome. What are the KSAs that the student can do and know? They don't necessarily care which ones are covered by each course. And then how do the certificates stack into the overall scheme of things. And then it's very important at the bottom, if they want changes you can't make, discuss why. Do not ignore them and see if they can help remove whatever barriers you have. This approach benefits students, faculty, and BILT members. More than an advisory council, they really co-lead. You need to change their name to something with leadership in it if you can. On the left is Matt Glover, who's our current BILT chair. On the right is Glenn Wintrick. He was actually retiring as our BILT chair. He was chair for about 10 years. But he then was working for Dell and was out of the country about 3 weeks out of 4. So he had to give up being the BILT chair. We've had extremely good involvement over time from very, very influential and people who are in the know and know where the industry is going. From Matt's view, this is how he put it. He's got 2 slides here. From the BILT chairman, the differentiators between an advisory council and a BILT. Industry advised versus industry-led. Suggested KSAs versus required KSAs. Well, no, they're not really totally 100% required, but they're strongly expected that you would try very hard to include the KSAs that the BILT wants. We also have the curriculum recognized by the BILT, and the BILT has skin in the game, opportunity to reduce their job costs, their on-the-job training costs, and of course they're giving back in a multi-generational, life-changing way. You know, because if you help someone go from a low-wage job to a higher-wage IT job, you're not just affecting them, you're affecting their children and their children's children into the future. If you look over on the left-hand side at the bottom, if the businesses make very strong recommendations to your program and you ignore it, that erodes their commitment and their willingness to come back. The BILT drives value, turning students from students to employees. The professor gains, because I believe that all instructors want their students to have the very best training they possibly can, training, engagement, education, whatever. You can call it whatever you want. We all, I think, want them to have the right skills for getting a really, really good job. And the business leader wants those entry-level employees to be able to be immediately productive, and they have a way to encourage eager talent, and it's a good result on all levels. BILT members help in a lot of other ways. I think I've mentioned several of these as we go along. They can be guest speakers in a class or guest speakers at a conference, guest speakers at a meeting, co-authoring papers, evaluating capstones. They participate in panels at conferences, and they hire the graduates. That's probably the biggest thing they do that's very, very important, and of course more. So now we're to questions. It's your turn. What do we have, Christina?
We have several.
Okay, go for it.
So one of the first questions that came in is, can we use this information from this webinar in proposals, particularly like the benefits? So is this important to writing a proposal for a grant?
Well, I'm biased. I think it's extremely important for you to begin implementing a true business and industry leadership team prior to submitting a proposal. And the program officers are pretty savvy. You can't just call it a BILT when it isn't. So yes, I think you not only can use it in the proposal. I know that one group that I worked with last year, I heard that from a program officer that the thing that kicked their proposal over the edge and caused it to be funded was the fact that they had already begun their process working with a truly engaged business and industry leadership team. The ATE program especially focuses on technician education and focuses on the workforce. And this model works. I'm not saying it's the only one that works, but this model works.
Okay. The next question, what kind of feedback do you commonly see colleges provide to businesses?
Well, it depends on whether you're seriously considering them as co-leaders of your work or not. the feedback tells them, if they tell you they want something done and you can't do it, it's important to feedback what you can't do and why you can't do it so they can help problem solve with you. It's also important, just to close the loop, if they spend a day with you, our business team on May 8th is going to spend a day with us. They'll be here from 8:30 in the morning till at least 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. In fact, I can't ever predict when they might be through. And that's not my requirement. They want to do that now. But the bottom line is, with the business and industry leadership team spending that much time with us and telling us what they want, if we don't do it, we need to at least tell them we're not. And if we do it, we need to tell them how we heard what we thought they said and how we are implementing it. If that didn't answer it, ask again, or raise. Is there a way to raise hands?
Yeah, they can raise their hand.
Oh, you can raise your hand and ask something else if you need to. I'm not sure that was it. If it's a business advisory council, I don't see a whole lot of feedback other than maybe a course description or a certificate description, but specifically tying it to what they said they wanted you to do, I don't see it done much.
Okay. So you talked a lot about the KSAs that this BILT reviews. How much time is spent on soft skills? Are those prioritized at all?
They are prioritized. However, we usually talk about employability skills and soft skills over lunch. And the reason we talk about them over lunch, we used to have it all delineated and separated out on written communication, oral communication, ability to make a presentation, dependability, all of those things. Well, guess what? They want them all. They don't want to just pick and choose from the list and say, oh, it doesn't matter if they can write. It matters if they can speak, or it doesn't matter if they can speak well if they can write. They don't say that. Our BILT has always said on all of the soft skills and all of the employability skills, we want them all. Yes, it's prioritized. It's very, very important. However, our conversation with our BILT is, how do you suggest we modify how we teach or what we put in our courses so that the students get exposure to these soft skills more than once? Because they told us a long, long time ago, they don't want us to have one single soft skills course, because if there's a single soft skills course, maybe the person gets through that course and then they go back to all of their bad practices. So yes, they're very important. We don't always put them on the KSA list because we typically talk about that over lunch.
Okay, so you talked about adding new BILT members to your team. Do you do any pre-training with new business partners using the matrix so that they can tune in right from the start?
Sometimes, but it's informal. Usually in adding people, at this point, they either come through an existing BILT member who pretty much tells them how it goes, what's going on, or they come from me phoning someone that I've gotten a lead on asking to join our BILT. Really training, not a full training program, but we do go through the process and explain what we're going to do. Now that I have all of these slides in one nice place, I might actually use all of them with the BILT members as well as with some of our college partners. But what I find is we want them for their subject matter expertise, and the process is not that complicated. The newbies that we've had, I think about the last face-to-face meeting, we had a couple of newbies there. Man, they were with it within 2 items on the KSA list.
Okay, and what is the optimum size of the BILT?
Well, that's a hard question. I say you should have 20 people so that you can be sure that you'll get about 10 there. And if you're talking about, and by the way, you need to focus on a particular discipline. You really don't want a BILT for all of IT. The person that knows software development probably is not the person that knows a lot about infrastructure, network infrastructure. In that case, maybe you have one IT meeting that you have 40 people come to, and then you break out into 2 subgroups. But the idea is, I want 10 people in the room at least, because if I don't have at least 10, then there's every chance that one of the bigger companies will dominate the discussion. And we all know that many of our graduates are employed by small to medium-sized firms, and it's very important to have that voice there. In the infrastructure IT, I try to make sure I have people who know quite a lot about the Cisco-type courses. Some, we actually loop in the systems administration courses, like managing the servers. So I have someone that knows that there, and then someone maybe that knows virtualization and something about cloud. But it's not as much, invite more than you think you need, and if you don't have that many, you need to probably have that many, because these people that we have on our BILT are very highly demanded at their work, and at the very last minute they can get scooped up for some crisis du jour, and they just can't come. By the way, I didn't talk about this. I need to add this into this presentation. When is the best time of day to have these meetings? 8:30 in the morning, folks. If you ever let them go to work, chances are very diminished for getting them out of work to come to you. So 8:30 in the morning is the time to do it. We do our virtual meetings at 8:30. We also do our face-to-face meetings starting at 8:30. We give them a really light breakfast because we realize they either don't eat breakfast or we spend a lot of money on very nice eggs and bacon that we didn't eat. And then we spend pretty good money on a nice lunch for them. You know, no rubber chicken, no soggy sandwiches. It doesn't have to be palatial, but some decent food.
Okay, another question was, what if my school resists the BILT model? What do you suggest?
Well, it depends on who in your school that's resisting. I am actually working with an entire college in Pennsylvania to implement the BILT model for all of their AAS programs, and they must have 15 of them. Sometimes you'll find that one faculty member, the department chair, may catch on and think this is great and have to actually sell it to the other faculty members. And if you'll go back to the fact that it benefits faculty, it benefits students, it may take a while, but I will say I've been working with this college off and on for 6 months now, and it's starting to gain real momentum in actually having the KSA meetings. They know all the facts now, and the KSA meetings are beginning to happen. They're expanding their numbers. It takes a passionate person who really believes this is worth it to keep talking, keep talking, keep talking. I think if you explain this to your dean, I don't think he'll have a problem. I don't care if you still call it an advisory council. Fine, call it that. It doesn't matter. Call it an advisory council. But be clear that you want to ask the people to lead your work. Yeah, and most of the resistance from faculty ends up coming from the fact that they think that because they're not supposed to take over the KSA meeting, that they're not heard. Well, you've still got the keys to the kingdom in what you do with the KSAs that are prioritized. It's still okay. And by the way, when you provide feedback, I've had a situation where one group went ahead and listened to the businesses, but then kind of left some of the things that they wanted to do in there anyway, even though the businesses said no. Well, when they provided feedback to the businesses nailed them and said, I don't think you heard us well. We're not going to hire that person. And they had to go back and change their program after again. If that didn't answer it, raise your hand and ask again. Ask in another manner.
Okay, so say your school started to adopt the BILT model, but the voting system hasn't caught on. How could you get your colleagues to start using the voting system?
Well, suggest the word pilot. You can do a lot of things if you call it a pilot. Let's pilot using the voting system so that we see what the businesses want and what they really value. Because especially in IT, we're getting to a point where they want more than will fit in our 60 semester hours or 70 semester hours anyway. So it's really important. It's a means by which you can decide what really needs to be there and what can maybe be left out. I'm working with a group that's going to pilot using clickers for voting. I haven't ever done that before, but if they can pull it off, it's fine with me. You know, the biggest thing is go one by one through the KSAs and discuss them. But the voting really is a nice way, because you know what? You can discuss some of this information over and over and over again, and then when it comes down to the voting, sometimes it will only come out as like a 2. And if it's a 2, that's something maybe you don't have to include in your curriculum.
All right. So one final question I have. You mentioned not to email the KSA out through email for voting, but what about surveys?
I wouldn't start with surveys, but surveys after they're part of the team and really engaged, surveys work pretty well, although you still kind of have to hound people to get the survey information back. In fact, most of the surveys that we get back come from our educational partners nationally, not from our BILT team members. More often than not, we spend time and contact the BILT members and ask them what's going well for them, what suggestions they have for improvement, et cetera, and we don't even really use surveys for them then. If you do a survey with a business team, it can't have more than 5 or 6 questions. They just aren't going to do something that's going to take very much of their time. Any other questions?
That's it.
That's it? Okay, well, thank you very much. We will we have recorded this. We will get it converted to YouTube, and we will send out the link
We did get one quick question.
Oh, okay.
Can you email KSAs for their consideration ahead of time and only count those votes that are real time?
No. The reason you don't email the KSAs ahead of time is because the business person who has already voted or thinks they've already voted, or they will try to vote when they have something come up that might take them away from your meeting. It's an easier way for them to say, I'm not coming at the last minute. We do not do that. We also want to emphasize that the discussion is every bit as important as the voting. So, no, we do not. I don't recommend that you email them ahead of time. Now, if someone misses, you might email to them and say, here's what we had, and, just, weigh in on this. But, again, that's kind of out of sync. They will not have the benefit of the discussion. So I don't think that's a good idea. I like email a lot. I like online a lot. Online synchronous meetings do tend to work. That actually does tend to work. However, just emailing something and letting them do it offline, that just doesn't work very well. Okay. Anything else? Thank you very much. Hope you have a great afternoon. Thanks for spending time with us, and I hope this was beneficial to you. Bye now.